The sense of betrayal in this story hits with a force that is almost unbearable. Imagine dedicating years to building a life with someone, trusting them with your deepest emotions, and believing that your bond is unbreakable, only to discover that the person you loved most has been secretly undermining everything you hold dear. The shock is compounded when the betrayal isn't limited to emotional deceit, but extends to collusion with someone in a position of power. In this case, the spouse didn't merely cheat in the shadows, they aligned themselves with the sheriff, a figure entrusted with upholding the law, to orchestrate a scheme that would turn the tables completely against the protagonist. It's the kind of treachery that feels almost cinematic, a cruel twist of fate designed to humiliate and destabilize. The initial realization is devastating, a moment where trust shatters and the foundation of personal security collapses. Every memory of shared moments, laughter, and intimacy suddenly becomes tinged with suspicion and anger. The protagonist is forced to grapple not just with heartbreak, but with the realization that someone who vowed loyalty actively worked against them, weaponizing the very systems meant to protect citizens to enforce personal desires and power games. There's a psychological torment in understanding that the betrayal wasn't a simple lapse in judgment or a fleeting mistake. It was calculated, premeditated, and executed with precision. This isn't just a spouse stepping out. It's a betrayal amplified by abuse of authority, where the emotional wound is mirrored by legal entanglements that make the victim feel trapped, powerless, and publicly shamed. The profound humiliation comes from knowing that the world can be turned against you so easily, that someone you trusted enough to build a life with could conspire with someone tasked with upholding justice to manufacture your downfall. It's the kind of scenario that ignites a range of intense emotions: anger, despair, disbelief, and a simmering determination to reclaim control. The narrative tension is rooted in this deep, personal sense of injustice, making the audience feel the weight of the betrayal alongside the protagonist. Readers or viewers are drawn into the emotional maelstrom because they can sense the vulnerability and the raw shock of discovering such deceit. The betrayal becomes not just a personal wound, but a catalyst for the entire story, setting the stage for the ensuing conflict, the fight against abusive power, and the intricate path toward retribution. It's the perfect opening to hook the audience, evoking empathy, outrage, and a desire to witness the protagonist's journey toward reclaiming dignity and delivering justice. The betrayal's impact is both intimate and dramatic, ensuring that the stakes are immediately high and emotionally gripping, compelling the audience to invest fully in the protagonist's story. The abuse of authority in this story adds a layer of tension and injustice that transforms personal betrayal into something far more dangerous and complex. The sheriff, a figure who is supposed to embody fairness, integrity, and protection, becomes an active participant in the protagonist's suffering. This misuse of power intensifies the narrative, showing how those entrusted with responsibility can manipulate their position for selfish or immoral purposes. In this case, the sheriff's involvement is not just a background detail. It is central to the protagonist's struggle, creating obstacles that feel insurmountable. When someone in authority turns against you, the sense of vulnerability skyrockets. You're not only battling personal betrayal, but also facing a system designed to safeguard society that is now weaponized against you. Every legal step, every interaction with law enforcement, and every attempt to assert innocence becomes fraught with risk because the very person who should enforce justice has chosen to exploit it for personal gain. The sheriff's actions reveal a corrupt intersection of personal desire and professional power, illustrating a terrifying reality. Authority figures are not infallible, and their misdeeds can have devastating consequences for those caught in their crossfire. The protagonist experiences an overwhelming sense of disorientation and fear, realizing that trust in societal structures has been violated. Even the simplest legal protections can feel hollow when someone in power manipulates the system to serve their own ends. The narrative tension is heightened by this dynamic because it raises the stakes beyond personal betrayal. It introduces a dangerous, systemic element. The audience feels the protagonist's fear, frustration, and helplessness, understanding that this is not just a matter of marital conflict, but a battle against entrenched authority that wields real consequences. The sheriff's abuse of power also adds a psychological dimension to the story. It is one thing to be hurt emotionally, but it is another to face strategic, institutionalized opposition that complicates every attempt at justice or redemption. The protagonist's journey becomes a fight not only to reclaim personal dignity, but to confront corruption and navigate a hostile system. This scenario evokes both outrage and suspense, keeping the audience deeply invested in seeing justice restored. The misuse of authority turns the story from a tale of infidelity into a narrative of resilience against unfair systems, highlighting the courage required to stand up against someone whose role inherently commands obedience and respect. The protagonist's response, in planning and executing a counter-strategy, becomes all the more satisfying because it represents triumph over both personal and systemic injustice. The corruption of the sheriff, therefore, serves as a critical pivot in the story, amplifying danger, emotional intensity, and suspense, making the eventual revenge feel not only justified but necessary and exhilarating. The protagonist's struggle as an underdog is the heart of the story, providing both emotional depth and narrative tension that keeps the audience engaged. From the moment of betrayal and false arrest, it is clear that they are facing impossible odds. They are not only dealing with a spouse who has broken their trust, but also with a sheriff who wields the law as a weapon against them. This combination creates a scenario where every move must be calculated, and every decision carries enormous risk. The sense of powerlessness is palpable, yet it is precisely this adversity that shapes the protagonist's resilience and determination. They must navigate a world that has turned hostile overnight, where former allies might hesitate to intervene, and the legal system seems more like a maze designed to trap them than a path to justice. Every interaction, whether it is with friends, family, or legal authorities, becomes a test of patience, intelligence, and emotional fortitude. The audience watches as the protagonist contends with humiliation, fear, and anger, yet refuses to succumb to despair. This portrayal of struggle taps into a universal human experience, the fight to reclaim dignity and agency when circumstances are stacked against you. The underdog narrative is compelling because it allows the audience to empathize deeply. We root for the protagonist precisely because they are outmatched and vulnerable. The story emphasizes that resilience is not about invulnerability, but about perseverance, strategy, and cleverness in the face of overwhelming challenges. The protagonist must learn to read people, anticipate moves, and exploit weaknesses in both personal relationships and the corrupt power structures arrayed against them. This process is neither quick nor easy. It involves setbacks, moments of doubt, and painful realizations about betrayal and manipulation, but it also showcases their resourcefulness and inner strength. By presenting the protagonist as an underdog, the story allows the audience to experience the tension of uncertainty, the suspense of planning, and the thrill of eventual triumph. Every step in their struggle is a victory against the forces that initially seemed insurmountable, and each small success builds toward the ultimate reckoning. The narrative highlights that being an underdog does not mean being passive. It means being aware of your limitations while finding ways to turn circumstances to your advantage. This struggle is also deeply emotional. The protagonist's fight is as much about reclaiming personal honor and self-respect as it is about achieving revenge. The audience feels the weight of every betrayal, the sting of injustice, and the courage required to confront such formidable adversaries. In essence, the underdog's journey transforms the story from a tale of betrayal into a saga of empowerment, strategy, and moral satisfaction. By the time the protagonist begins to turn the tables, the audience has invested emotionally in their journey, making every triumph feel well-earned and every act of clever retaliation deeply satisfying. The protagonist's clever and strategic revenge becomes the centerpiece of the story, transforming a narrative of betrayal and abuse into a tale of intelligence, patience, and precise execution. After enduring the emotional trauma of being betrayed by a spouse and wrongfully arrested through the misuse of authority, the protagonist refuses to remain a victim. Instead, they channel their anger and humiliation into a calculated plan that targets both the wife and the sheriff, ensuring that justice, in its most personal and satisfying form, is served. This phase of the story is compelling because it highlights the power of intellect and foresight over brute force or impulsive action. Each move is meticulously thought out, demonstrating the protagonist's ability to anticipate reactions, exploit weaknesses, and manipulate circumstances to their advantage. The audience experiences a sense of suspense and anticipation, wondering how someone who appeared powerless could orchestrate such a masterful reversal. Planning itself is a narrative of strategy, researching vulnerabilities, gathering evidence, and setting up situations that expose deceit and corruption. The protagonist's actions are precise and deliberate. They understand that timing, subtlety, and psychology are as critical as the plan itself. There is a thrilling complexity in how they balance patience with boldness, knowing that any misstep could jeopardize their goals or escalate danger. This element of clever revenge resonates deeply because it taps into a universal fantasy, the underdog outsmarting those who have wronged them in a way that is satisfying, public, and undeniable. Unlike a story of impulsive retaliation, the protagonist's approach emphasizes discipline and careful orchestration, highlighting that true power lies in intellect and strategy. Additionally, the revenge is multi-layered, targeting both the personal betrayal of the spouse and the institutional abuse of the sheriff. This dual focus ensures that justice is comprehensive, hitting both emotional and systemic dimensions of the wrongdoing. The narrative showcases how ingenuity can level the playing field against seemingly invincible adversaries, turning fear and disadvantage into tools for empowerment. For the audience, this is deeply gratifying. They witness not only the downfall of corrupt and deceitful individuals, but also the transformation of the protagonist from a victim into a masterful strategist. Every revelation, every trap sprung, and every consequence faced by the wife and sheriff reinforces the protagonist's ingenuity and moral authority. The careful planning and execution of revenge also provide a psychological satisfaction that resonates with readers or viewers, fulfilling the desire for poetic justice in a world where institutional power and personal betrayal often go unchecked. Ultimately, this stage of the story emphasizes that revenge, when guided by intelligence, patience, and precision, becomes a potent instrument of justice, turning vulnerability into strength and betrayal into an opportunity to reclaim control and dignity. The emotional payoff in this story is what makes the entire journey deeply satisfying, turning a tale of betrayal, corruption, and struggle into a cathartic experience for both the protagonist and the audience. After enduring immense emotional pain, public humiliation, and the crushing weight of injustice, The protagonist's actions culminate in a moment of reckoning where the consequences of the wife's infidelity and the sheriff's abuse of authority are fully realized. This payoff is not merely about revenge. It is about justice, closure, and reclaiming a sense of personal dignity that was nearly destroyed. Every strategic move, every subtle manipulation, and every calculated exposure of deceit leads to the ultimate satisfaction of seeing the guilty parties face the repercussions they so richly deserve. The audience experiences a profound sense of relief and validation, knowing that the protagonist's suffering was not in vain and that their cleverness, resilience, and courage were rewarded. The emotional payoff also resonates because it balances the dark elements of the story with a morally satisfying conclusion. The wife and sheriff, who once wielded power with impunity, are confronted with the consequences of their actions, exposing not only their corruption and betrayal, but also the arrogance and complacency that led to their downfall. This sense of poetic justice is deeply gratifying, as it fulfills a universal desire to see wrongdoers held accountable, particularly when the system itself has been manipulated to serve their interests. For the protagonist, the payoff is both external and internal. Externally, they have restored their reputation, dismantled the web of deceit, and ensured that those who wrong them cannot escape responsibility. Internally, they regain self-respect, confidence, and a renewed sense of control over their life. The audience is drawn into this emotional journey, feeling every pang of injustice and every triumph of strategy as if it were their own. The narrative emphasizes that true satisfaction comes not from impulsive retaliation, but from thoughtful, intelligent action that brings about lasting consequences. By the story's conclusion, the protagonist has not only overcome personal betrayal and systemic abuse, but has also achieved a moral victory, demonstrating that perseverance, intelligence, and resilience can triumph over even the most formidable adversaries. The emotional payoff is heightened by the contrast between the protagonist's initial helplessness and their ultimate empowerment. This transformation allows readers or viewers to experience a vicarious sense of triumph, catharsis, and relief, making the story compelling and memorable. It reinforces the central themes of justice, accountability, and personal empowerment, leaving a lasting impression that the wrongs inflicted by betrayal and corruption can be confronted and overturned. In essence, the emotional payoff is the crown of the story, rewarding patience, resilience, and strategic thinking while delivering a satisfying conclusion that resonates long after the tale has ended.